So let's go ahead and take a look at some of this stuff here. So basically the idea is, do people want to invest in your country? Are they feeling safe about holding your currency? That is what political risk and investment climate is measuring. So there's various organizations that provide ratings, quantitative ratings. So these are just some. But if you want to look and see how is a country rated in terms of these things, Free the World is one, Heritage has theirs, World Bank Doing Business Rank is another one. Let's go ahead and take a look at the different facets of the political risk and investment climate. The first thing is property rights. So basic idea is, can you invest in property without worrying about the government taking your property? And in the US, ideally, our government would always follow the takings clause. I say ideally if you're an investor. And the takings clause in the Fifth Amendment says the government can't take your property without just compensation. All right, so that is enshrined, if you will, in the U.S. government, and that's the ideal that hopefully we always follow. Ideal from an investor's perspective again, though. But is it always followed? No, sometimes the government takes your property to build a stadium or to build an interstate or whatever. So this isn't always followed, but the U.S. has got better property rights than a lot of other countries. Other countries might take your property more quickly. Second bullet point there, when Lenin came to power, he nationalized everything. Nationalized means the government buys or takes all the property of private owners. And so what happens there? Would you want to invest in Russia after Lenin came to power? No, you wouldn't, right? So their currency is going to be weak, right? So the ruble there would be weak. Same thing happened in Cuba when Castro came to power in 1960. A friend of mine, her family owned the Coca-Cola distributorship in Cuba prior to 1960. And so Castro came to power, and it became apparent to them that they were going to lose that distributorship because Castro said, I need that stuff to support what I want to do. And so anyway, she told me that they would, the Cuban government, Castro's government at that point in time, would come through the streets in the middle of the night with army trucks and pull people out of their houses and put them in jail if they were an enemy of the state. And so anyway, her family fled Cuba and moved to Tampa in the early 1960s. So would you want to invest in Castro's economy? No, you wouldn't, right? So their currency is going to be weak because there's no demand for that. All right, last class, I think I talked about this, that in this period, 2001, 2002, Argentine government said, okay, you've got US dollars in a bank account here in an Argentine bank. Well, we need those dollars to import stuff that's important, maybe pharmaceuticals from another country. And they said, you're not going to have those dollars anymore. We're going to replace them with Argentine pesos. And well, as you might guess, that's not a good deal if you're a bank depositor there. Tax laws, why does Ireland do so well? They call it the Celtic Tiger because their tax rate is 10%. Corporate profits are 10%. And Ireland's part of the EU, and if you're, say, Microsoft, and you want to export stuff to the EU, you can set up an office in Ireland, sell stuff in the EU, right, without any tariffs because Ireland's part of the EU. And you bring that stuff back to Ireland. You recognize your profits in Ireland, Microsoft does, and you don't pay very much taxes there. You claim that you have some expenses in Ireland, and you eventually will bring that money back to the U.S. to pay off your shareholders in U.S. dollars, right? Maybe you'll time the currency markets or you'll time regulations and eventually bring your money back to the U.S. And that's That's just the way it works. And you can see why the Biden administration wanted to have a universal global corporate tax. Because there's some people that claim that these tech companies especially, they don't really have any operations in Ireland, or they don't add that much value to their product in Ireland. They're just doing it to recognize some profits there in a low tax country. All right, be that whether or not that's true, I'll leave you for you guys to decide. Okay, so now in President Trump's first term, when he came to power, he said, okay, all this money that's overseas that U.S. corporations have overseas, I want you to bring it back here to the U.S. and invest in businesses in the U.S. And so the administration proposed a reduction in repatriation taxes. So patriation, talking about the fatherland there, right? Bring money back to the fatherland. And so the idea was, if we reduce taxes, there are taxes, so if Microsoft eventually brings that Irish money back to the U.S., they'll pay a repatriation tax depending on the tax treaty that we have with that country. Anyway, he was going to reduce the repatriation tax, and that was going to go ahead and get companies to bring money back to the U.S., invest in the U.S., create jobs in the U.S. All right, so let's say I was to ask you about repatriation, and I was to give you a scenario where you had Procter & Gamble had pound profits in a UK bank, and they decide, okay, this is a good deal, this reduced tax rate. So we're going to repatriate profits back to the U.S. What should happen to the value of the dollar there? Will?
Increase.
Should increase, right? Because we're going to have selling of the pound and buying of the dollar, right? So they're going to, Procter & Gamble here would sell their pounds and buy dollars. All right, so dollar should go up. Convertibility of the currency. This is important to investors because some countries you can't cash out. You've made an investment in a country, but that country doesn't have enough dollars in their banking system to let you convert the local currency to U.S. dollars to bring your profits back. Or the government doesn't want you to. So Chinese government has had capital controls over time. So they limited the amount of selling of yuan for foreign currencies. Why? Because the currency was going down, the yuan was going down, and they were trying to manage its value. They still do. Russian government, the ruble was going down after the Ukraine war started. They didn't want the ruble to go down anymore. So they said, okay, you can't sell rubles too much because that will make it go down even more. Argentina had the same restriction there in 2019. Iceland froze convertibility of the krona during the financial crisis. No pun intended. They froze convertibility. All right, thank you. So now we have, it might be the case the government doesn't care if you cash out so much. Maybe they don't care too much. But might be the case that they just there's just not enough dollars or euros in the banking system there. Lucas?
For example, Argentina, I know they have the peso and the dollar, the normal dollar, but then they did the dollar blue, and it's like extra official. Can you cast that out, or is it not legal to like repatriate that dollar?
I think the dollar blue refers to the informal market value of the peso. So I think that is, if you're a corporation, you probably can't get enough liquidity in the dollar blue market because you've got, lots, millions of dollars worth of pesos to convert back to dollars. You probably have to go to a bank there's probably not enough liquidity in the informal markets there. So, but that's a great question. Dollar blue is that rate. So now, Argentine peso has actually gone up in value over the past year, right? The new government has instituted some things to restore confidence in the currency, and so we'll see what happens going forward there. So now governments recognize that they need to keep the dollars or euros in their banking system that they have, and they don't want to let it go, or they want to force importers to find their own hard currency to import stuff. And my example here is, again, from Argentina. The Argentine government, this was in 2012, they went to the BMW dealers in Argentina, and they said, look, you want to import luxury automobiles from Europe to sell in Argentina? That's not a good use of our hard currency that we have in the banking system, right? So we're not going to let you use the euros or the dollars that we have to import BMWs into Argentina. And they said to the BMW dealers, look, if you want to get that hard currency, you're not going to get it from the banks. You got to start exporting stuff from Argentina to the rest of the world and earn your dollars or euros that way. So the BMW dealers, to be able to bring those cars into Argentina, they were selling Argentine stuff. They were selling Argentine grape juice and rice. They were exporting that. Same deal with Pirelli tire dealers. They were saying, okay, Pirelli tire dealers, if you want to bring those tires from Europe, we're not going to let you use the euros or dollars we have in the banks here to bring those things in. So the Pirelli dealers were exporting Argentine honey. Now you got to admit, that's not a very good way to run your economy, right? You got a tire dealer selling honey. What does a tire dealer know about honey? It's not economic efficiency, right? That's not a good thing. You should have some specialization there. It's not economic efficiency when you have a tire dealer exporting honey. As a matter of fact, I think you could say it's a sticky situation. Thank you. So, it doesn't get any better than this. I'm sorry. That's the best it gets. So, now, other countries have said, you can't use our hard currency to import stuff from abroad. Nigeria was one of those countries. They said, look, you can't use hard currency from our banks to import the following items, and I'm just going to give you a sample of them. Private jets. Well, that makes sense, right? Who needs a private jet? Well, I would like one, but I don't need one, right? So wheelbarrows, you can't import them into Nigeria. We use in dollars and euros that we have here. Steel drums, toothpicks, soap and cosmetics, tomatoes and tomato paste. I guess a lot of those things they already make there, and they don't feel like, okay, you should be importing this stuff because you could have bought it locally if you wanted. All right, now let me ask you this. Mexico, of course, they need dollars and euros in their banking system too. Every country does, right? Because remember, the vast majority of global trade is priced in dollars or euros. That's probably, 70 or 80% of global trade is priced in dollars or euros. It doesn't matter where the country is or who they're trading with, dollars or euros, right? All right, so Mexico needs to have dollars or euros. Why? Because they got import necessity. Let's call it the COVID vaccine, right? They need to import that. All right, so tell me this. What is Mexico's largest source of dollars in the banking system? How do they get the most dollars in their banking system there? Casey?
Is it labor?
Exactly, it's labor, right? You have remittances. You have Mexicans working in other countries, U.S. of course, sending money back to their family. So remittances is a big one. Remittances, you've got people working abroad, Mexicans working abroad, sending money back to their family in dollar terms. That's their largest source of dollars. Now, I've always asked this question, and I get various guesses. One person said tourism. I think that's a good guess, but no, it's not tourism. Another person guessed oil. That's a good one, too, because Mexico has a lot of oil. Now, one semester, this is a true story, one semester, a student said the largest source of dollars for Mexico is concrete. I said, darn, that's a pretty good guess. But no, it's not concrete. I said, it's remittances. It's people sending money back to their family. I said, it's not something you can put your finger on like concrete, right? He guessed cement, excuse me. He guessed cement. He guessed cement. And I said, cement's a good guess. But you see, it's not something you can put your finger on. It's Mexicans sending money back to the family. Cement's a good guess. It's intangible, though. You're being too concrete. I blew that joke. So, anyway, now, here's another fun fact, or it depends on your perspective, maybe. U.S. foreign aid to the Northern Triangle, what's that, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, was only $2.6 billion in 2018. Remittances, people from those countries sending money back to their family, was about $20 billion, right? So what's that, a factor of 8 or something? So 8 times as much dollars was coming to them from family members sending money back there. So you could argue that if you want to get foreign aid to those countries, the best way is to allow those folks to come here and work, right? You could argue that. Now, I know there's other arguments to be made. The counter argument, just briefly, is that they're going to take jobs from Americans, right? Well, shoot, I don't need to go into all that because you guys know the counter arguments. But anyway, I thought it was a cool idea because, you know, that's the amount, if you want to help those countries, that's one way to do it. All right, so anyway, now, you could also argue that remittances aren't a good thing. Why? Because they prop up corrupt governments. So if you believe that Nicaragua is corrupt, if you got Nicaraguans sending money back to their family, the government there can keep on going because they've got dollars coming in. All right, how does North Korea earn dollars? Did you ever wonder about that? The Hermit Kingdom, how do they earn dollars? They give their diplomats drugs to sell abroad. That's the true story. I'm not making that up. They give them drugs to sell in other countries, and diplomats have got to meet their quota and send a certain amount of dollars back there, right? It's a bizarre world out there. Peyton?
To what extent do you see drug trade in Mexico kind of propping up the economy versus it being like a source of corruption in the market? Like, is that kind of an indeterminate effect, or do you see countries that are involved in the drug trade generally having a stronger kind of currency because of it?
I'm sorry, say it again. What's relative?
Like, do you see countries that are involved in the drug trade generally having stronger economies than not, or does kind of the corruption aspect that it brings to economies really bring it down more so than the added dollars in the economy do?
Yeah. I guess I really can't make a call on that one. I would say that maybe a little bit of drugs being sold is a good thing. If you have too much being sold, then pretty soon the criminals are running the country, right? And now all the legitimate enterprises get crowded out. I mean, I think that's one thing. That's another argument against remittances. If you have people sending money back to their family, and they're selling those dollars and they're buying Mexican pesos. That makes a peso stronger, which means it's harder for other Mexican businesses to export because the peso is now more expensive there. So there, Lucas?
Like something similar to what you said, but if they're sending enough money to like sustain the family, doesn't that mean there's less of a workforce in Mexico because they're just living off the dollars that they're sending them?
Yeah. So you're saying that remittances might not be a good idea because you have too much people not active in the economy? Yeah, that could be the case too there. Grayson?
Remittances also devalue the home country's currency because I feel like I saw a video
Mhm.
in Brazil a few years ago where they're like, yeah, hot dog is 2 weeks' wages, but you need to get money from the U.S. or from a family member.
Yeah, it could be the case. It creates inflation there, right?
Yeah.
It could create inflation in Brazil. So now, if you have enough people selling dollars and buying Brazilian real, should actually make the real stronger. But you have those two opposing forces there, right? You've got inflation should make the real weaker. But if you've got just the transactional nature of remittances, that should make the real stronger. So, but definitely could increase prices because some people are privileged to have that money coming in, and other people, a lot of other people don't have that. They don't have family members working abroad there. For what it's worth, my son spent some time in Guatemala, and just an anecdotal story, and he was in a small town there, and he said that when somebody in the town successfully made it to the U.S., they had a celebration in the town square. So, and he thought it was sad because, obviously there wasn't enough economic opportunity in that country for those people to make a go of it there. So, but anyway, let's see. I was going to say something else there. Peyton's question reminded me of something else, but anyway, it might come back to me one of these days. So now, anyway, let's go on. Why else might you not want to invest in a country? Well, this one's obvious. Political risk, right? And war is an extreme form. And so we had the Syrian civil war, but then and obviously you guys probably know that Syrian government just got overthrown. And that's obviously not good for the currency. SYP, Syrian pound, from 2020 to 2025, it went down by 97%. So would you want to invest there? Well, that's a ridiculous question, isn't it? But one of the reasons why you wouldn't is because when you cash out of the country, your pounds aren't worth very many dollars or euros. Corruption's another form. Foreign aid went to Mozambique, and some of that money went to the government officials buying luxury items for themselves. It happens all over the place, though. It's not just there. Well, it happens in every country, right, including our own probably, I would say. It probably does. U.S. sanctions on Iran, so political risk can come from the outside. The U.S. government has sanctioned Iran, which made their economy weaker and made their currency weaker. Greek government defaults. They have a history of defaults. Since the modern founding of Greece in 1829, they have spent more than half their existence in default on their debt. So anyway, investment restrictions could be. Yes, sir, Quincy.
So, like, for the U.S. sanctioning Iran, does that help the U.S. dollar? Like, if you're to trade like their currency pair, knowing that the Iran currency, I don't know what that is, going down against the dollar, like you might invest in that like pair, would that help the U.S. dollar?
Oh yeah, yeah, and maybe you would say it's not so much the dollar going up as it is the Iranian. I think it's the real, I think you say, it going down just because when the U.S. government placed sanctions on them, they couldn't sell oil in the global markets. And so, you know, if they can't sell one of their primary goods, then that economy is going to do poorly. People aren't going to want to invest there. And I should say it's not just foreigners not wanting to invest there, it's the local citizens. So if you're in, say, Turkey, at one point in time, and I think this is still true to some extent, the Turkish citizens didn't want to hold their own currency. They didn't want to hold Turkish lira. They wanted to have dollars or euros or crypto so that they could have a store of value there. So, and I'm sure a lot of Iranian folks feel the same way, is they don't want to hold their own currency. And it's often the case that if you're in one of those countries and you have family abroad and they're able to send money to you, they'll send it to you. They can send it in crypto form so that the government can't take it. Because if you put it through the banking system, the government can take it from you. So anyway, investment restrictions. Recently, at the end of 2024, the Chinese government has loosened up their restrictions, but historically it's been the case that you can't invest there very easily. All right, they said at one time a foreign investor can only buy this amount of a Chinese company. I think it was 30%, but that has eased up. So will you want to invest in China? Well, you might not be able to, right? And why would China do that? Well, they want foreign capital, but also they want the yuan to move towards being a reserve currency. And to get a reserve currency status, you got to have some capital flows that are allowed between your country and other countries. Now, in my humble opinion, Chinese government is sort of in a rock and a hard place, right? To have a reserve currency or to get reserve currency status, you want a strong currency that people are going to have confidence in. But if you have an export-oriented economy like China, you don't want it to be too strong, right? Because then your stuff is going to be expensive to the rest of the world. And so that is, Evan?
The other day we were talking about sudden stops. So how does a country like China improve the yuan by lifting those restrictions without letting those sudden stops happen? Like, which investments are best for them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it would probably be somewhat discretionary as to who they would let pull their money out of the country. I know at one point in time, Chinese citizens couldn't sell more than $50,000 worth of yuan in a given year. Now, if it's some foreign investor that the government wants to get favor with, then maybe they'll let them sell more. Maybe if it's someone that they don't care about. They have a whole authority that governs this. SAFE is the acronym, at least the English acronym. So, yeah, I think probably be case by case. Probably try to, and they can pull it out or go easy or go hard, depending on what's happening. It's been said that the restriction the Chinese government has on people being able to pull their money out has resulted in a lot of trapped capital there, so Chinese citizens can't invest outside that country, and that's part of the reason why they had a real estate bubble, is because everybody was buying Chinese houses or whatever, or apartment buildings or apartments. So instead of investing in other things. So and the U.S. government has also restricted investment into China, so that would keep the yuan weaker than it otherwise would be, because you're not going to be buying yuan. It's not something you can do. You can't invest there. The U.S. government, places restrictions on foreign investors buying into, say, our AI industry or something, right? Or our social media, right? So anyway. anyway, or we might expel them there. Yes, sir. So, Trevor?
Yep, just in terms of also talking about foreign investment in China, do you also think like the inconsistency in terms of kind of disclosure quality coming out of China, which makes it harder for just like American companies and American investors to do like their due diligence on the domestic economy, has also kind of been like a deterrent for foreign investment?
Yeah, no, that's another good point there, too. Should probably add that to my outline, is that the information in some countries is poor, or at least manipulated such that you can't trust it. And would you want to invest there? You'd have to have some really good deal that you're confident in. So apparently, I think this is probably still true, but if you take the economics, if you take GDP from, is it the provinces of China, and you add them up, it doesn't add up to the total Chinese government stated GDP, and it's beyond a fudge factor apparently. And some Chinese economists went to some foreign conference and stated this in the past 6 months, and he hasn't said a whole lot since then. I don't know what happened there. if he just wised up, or they sent into a re-education camp, I don't know. So I think about that. My son had me watching that Netflix show. What's the science fiction show where the opening scene is the 3-body problem? So that's a pretty dramatic scene. If you guys watch that Netflix, so I'm not into science fiction, but you might find that very instructional. And it happened at Tsinghua University, apparently, according to the show anyway. And you know, it's a show, so there's a lot of science fiction in it, but I think that opening scene has some validity. I have a former student. She said that her grandparents were professors, and this was, I think, during the Cultural Revolution. They sent her parents to go work on a farm because they didn't want the intellectuals being intellectuals. They wanted them somewhere else. I guess you could say they wanted to humble them. I don't know. I think there's more another interpretation of that too. I don't know. We're not perfect here by any means, but it's a pretty scary recent 50 years that they've had. So hopefully things will get better. I don't know. But they're definitely opening up their economy to foreign investors. So now, would you want to invest there? Maybe not. Did you guys see the CNBC show where, I don't know, I haven't tried this, but they went to DeepSeek? And that's the AI, and somebody, the host on CNBC asked DeepSeek, what are you based on? And DeepSeek said, I'm based on ChatGPT. So I don't know that that's really the case. Somebody else I saw said that it's open source software, so it's not just a cheap imitation of ChatGPT. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I do know, though, that Venezuela is been terribly mismanaged by, their economy has been terribly mismanaged by the government, and it's really tragic because the people there have suffered. They have the largest proven oil reserves in the world. All right, so is there any excuse for them having poverty? Shouldn't be the case, right? Government mismanagement. They have what the economists might, or what they do call the resource curse. The resource curse is you got something so good that you can sell, that you're just going to depend on that one thing, and you're going to export that one thing. And the problem is you don't diversify your economy. And if the price drops for that one thing, then your economy does poorly. And makes your currency more expensive than otherwise would be, at least at the beginning of that happening. And so going back a ways, it made the currency more expensive, which means that the other stuff they export becomes too expensive, and they become more dependent on that export, which for them was oil. The country with the opposite of the resource curse is Japan. I don't think they have any natural resources, right? So why do they have Fukushima? Why do they have a nuclear power plant? Because they don't have any they don't have any carbon sources of energy. You have to import it all. But Japan has done well because they have a pretty diversified economy. Anyway, so that's the resource curse. The mismanagement of the economy was that the government nationalized this many companies, more than 1,500 companies. And so they changed their exchange rate. The government controls the exchange rate. Why? Because it's not widely traded on the global markets, so they have some control over that through their local banks. They devalued their currency. So what does that mean? Their currency went down by 32%. So if you calculate this, it's a decline of 32%. What does that mean? If you're Colgate and selling toothpaste in Venezuela, your sales in Venezuela are now worth 32% less in dollar terms. And so if you're Colgate, right, you can't use the informal market. You got to go to a Venezuelan bank, and the Venezuelan bank has got to honor the government's exchange rate. Anyway, a lot of companies, U.S. companies, left Venezuela. Why? Because they couldn't do business there. It's not good for the economy. If you look, the detrimental effects here, the economy shrunk by 35% over that time period. Poverty rate increased. People fled Venezuela, as you guys well know if you've been watching the news, because there's not much hope for the local economy there. Good news is, out of there, the U.S. Treasury wanted to transfer money to Venezuelan citizens, so what should you do? Should you give the money to the Venezuelan government? No, because they're corrupt. So what you do is you use a digital currency platform to transfer money to the actual citizens. So that's perhaps good news about that story. Not much there, but that's some good news. All right, now, what if you want some rating, you want to put a number on political risk and investment climate? On the next pages there, you see various ratings for investment climate, doing business. This is the World Bank's, if you're going to start up a business in that country. And I just provided these countries as examples. Political risk is there. Harvard has an economic complexity index. So you want a diversified economy, right? Because you don't want the